This next topic was suggested to me by a patron on Patreon, and just a little reminder, I'd like to be doing this show full time. This is what I want to do more than anything else. This is what I want to spend my time doing. But in order for me to do that, it has to be sustainable. And like you guys may have already heard me talk about before, I cannot rely on YouTube. As you may have noticed, for the last month, almost 2 months now, YouTube took all the ads off my videos. They froze my ad account. Can't even cash the check for the money they owe me because I need to enter a pin into my account that they're supposed to mail to me. But with all this going on with the postal service, it has been months and I still have not received it. So my account's frozen, have no ads, and getting absolutely no money from YouTube at this point. So if you want me to put all my time and energy into the show, as I have been doing for the last 2 years, I need you guys to support the show, to support me financially. So the link to my Patreon account is in the About page on my YouTube channel. I may be putting some other links in there too, like PayPal and things like that. Like I said, the less I have to worry about money, the more time I can put into the show. So if you can, I'd greatly appreciate it. If you're a patron and you have a topic suggestion you want me to talk about on the show, send me a message. I'll get back to you. If it's something that I want to talk about, then I'll let you know, and I'll send you a message before I post it on YouTube. A related topic, love Spencer. I did not forget about you, and I will be making that video soon. Now, to the topic at hand, reparations. Aisha, who was the one who asked me to talk about this topic, in the message, she wanted me to talk about new media and how the lack of conversation, I guess, in new media around the issue. So I'll get to that, but that'll be later on in the video. Before then, I want to make clear my position on reparations and some disagreements I have with the African descendants of slaves movement, since I haven't really done a entire video dedicated to this topic on the show before. So like many issues, the current crises of the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis has radicalized me on the issue of reparations. And it is solidly in the top 10 most important issues or policy goals for me. And honestly, if you exclude some of the most immediate, urgent, emergency policies, things like protective equipment for all workers right now and mandatory hazard pay, then reparations is in my top 5. Like I said, these current crises that we're going through right now in this country have radicalized me on the issue of reparations and have just made it crystal clear to me that the Black community and minorities in this country cannot progress unless and until we deal with the economic ramifications of centuries of white supremacy in this country. Look at the group that's disproportionately infected and end up dying from COVID. It's Black minority people. Look at the people who have been hardest hit economically during this unprecedented economic collapse. It's the working class, and again, disproportionately Black people. I think nationally, the number was about 40% of all small businesses are going to close permanently if they haven't already. The number of Black-owned small businesses that are going to close is somewhere around 60% or something like that, maybe even higher. So, like I said, this is directly correlated to the economic ramifications of white supremacy in this country. So many Black people are working class because after generations of slavery and segregation, Black people do not inherit the same amount of wealth that white people do. They do not inherit the wealth that can enable them to start a business, the institutional knowledge that comes from generations of owning a business. They don't get to inherit businesses from their parents or their grandparents. A lot of them don't have the opportunity to go to college. So what is left for them other than to be part of the working class? And in times of economic crisis, it is the working class who gets the brunt of the devastation. With the black small business closures. Now, part of that might be due to the fact that black small businesses are in black communities, and when they took a hit, also the black business owners took a hit. But more than that, who was giving out the loans? Who was in charge of giving out the loans to small businesses, the grants to small businesses? It was largely banks. The same banks that have an incredibly racist history of redlining and shutting out black people from the economy. So you give them almost sole authority to decide which business lives or dies. And what do you know? They chose the white businesses over the black businesses. And of course, there were a lot of businesses owned by white people that didn't get loans and didn't get enough loans. And they're going to end up closing permanently too. Like I said, 40% of all small businesses are going to end up closing permanently in this country. But black business owners got even less economic relief than white business owners. And that is a fact. These new crises have set the black community back generations again. Increased the wealth gap even further between the racial wealth inequality even further in this country. So if we're going to even have a conversation about giving people equal opportunity in this country, we're going to have to address that giant racial wealth gap. On average in this country, a white person inherits 10 times more wealth than a black person from their family. That's not something that is going to be overcome by working harder, being strategic in what jobs you take. That is a systemic problem. A lot of these corporations and business owners would not be in the position they are. They would not have the wealth that they had it not been for slavery and segregation and all this other racial discrimination that has gone on in this country for centuries. Again, I'm not an expert on this. I can't tell you what the exact amount, dollar figure of reparations should be, but it is definitely in the trillions of dollars. There's conversation about whether it should be in a lump sum payment or it should be something that is granted in perpetuity. I agree with that option more. Now, here is where I have some major disagreements with some of the proponents for reparations. As necessary as I think reparations are, I think reparations cannot happen unless there is major economic relief provided to all the working class and poor people in this country first. And let me tell you why. The only way we get reparations is through legislation. And the only way we can get politicians to act on any serious legislation for reparations is if we have the support of the majority of the country. And if you explain the issue of the racial wealth gap to most people in this country, who, by the way, the majority of the country, about 60% of the country, over 60% of the country is white. So if you explain the racial wealth gap and how it got this way and how it is going to continue unabated without reparations, I do believe they would understand it. And I believe they would be sympathetic to the argument. And I do believe they would actually support reparations. But I don't think you're going to get a majority of them to support it, to support giving trillions of dollars to black people in this country, if a lot of them are also poor and in desperate economic conditions. Because whether you think it's a right mindset or right logic or correct logic, the way they're going to view it is, why am I going to break my back to force politicians to give trillions of dollars to black people and radically improve their economic conditions while mine stays the same? Again, you can disagree with that logic, but I guarantee you that's going to be the logic of many, many poor working class white people in this country. So when people say it's divisive, one of the reasons they're talking about is that it is divisive to the working class. If there isn't also economic relief for the regular working class in this country. And I mean policies that we already support, like Medicare for All and UBI and a living wage, free college. I'm not saying we have to get all those things, but there is some combination of those things that have to happen so that the majority of the working class in this country, who's living paycheck to paycheck, 74% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck, and that was before COVID, they need to feel like they'll be okay, that they're in a sustainable economic position before they support giving trillions of dollars to black people. That's just my view on that. And let me get to another major disagreement I have with some of the biggest proponents of reparations, specifically the ADOS movement or organization, African descendants of slaves. Now, with them, there are some glaring contradictions that I cannot get over. And there is also a hint of xenophobia, because what that specific organization is trying to do is get reparations specifically only for African Americans who can trace their lineage back to slaves that were owned here in the United States. And they explicitly exclude anybody who is from the Caribbean, who is also Americans, because we are American citizens. A lot of us who are either naturalized or born here in the United States, we are also technically or African descendants of slaves and citizens of this country. But they explicitly exclude us from their push for reparations. And I have a problem with that, because you claim that you want to address the racial disparities, racial economic ramifications of white supremacy in this country that has come about as a result of slavery and other forms of segregation and discrimination. But you want to exclude people who are also part of that very same system of slavery and segregation and discrimination. And they draw this weird line and they say, oh, you guys chose to come to this country. Specifically speaking about people from the Caribbean, like me. My mom's from Jamaica. It was an island of slaves. They were part of the British slave trade. But they say, since you chose to come to this country, you should be exempt from any sort of reparations. What? And they might make draw some weird legal distinction of that, oh no, you were British slaves, but you weren't technically owned by American slave owners after the revolution, so you don't count. And again, this seems just like a huge contradiction to me. You guys are the ADOS organization says that they are owed reparations because the wealth of this country that has been built on the backs of slaves could not exist without the slaves that were left out of the economic process. So therefore we are owed these reparations, however much money it is. So why do you draw the line at the American Revolution? None of this, the slave trading business, kidnapping slaves from Africa, wouldn't have been a thing without the British slave trade. So the system of slavery that you want reparations for was created by British slave traders. That's what was the foundation of the United States. But you're going to say that people who were also part of that British slave trade, just because they were dropped off on a different piece of land, should be excluded from any reparations in this country. That's just a giant contradiction to me. And again, even in the name of the organization, African Descendants of Slaves, If you are Jamaican, you are an African descendant of slaves, but somehow you aren't represented in this group. And that's the xenophobia that I'm talking about. They draw this weird distinction of people, only if you went straight from Africa to this patch of land that's now called the United States. That's the only people who count. Okay, then change your name to something that accurately describes that. And so that's another way that I feel like this reparations movement is divisive, specifically in the Black community, because you're trying to pit Black Americans who against other citizens who were African descendants of slaves, but just were dropped off on another Caribbean island. And you're trying to say that even though you guys have, and this is another thing, a lot of them want to make the argument that not only do we deserve reparations for the actual labor that we did not get paid for, but also the years of discrimination that followed, the centuries of discrimination that followed. Okay, we as Black people living in this country, we have all faced the same discrimination. We have all faced redlining. We've all faced police abuses. We've all faced job discrimination. So again, it's weird that you're going to say, oh no, you guys don't count just because you came from another country. My mom's lived here for almost her entire life. From before she was even an adult, she was here in the United States. She's faced discrimination, the very same discrimination that Black Americans whose ancestors came straight from Africa have experienced in this country. The banks, when they're redlining people, they don't check, oh, you came from Jamaica, I'm gonna treat you better than a Black American who ancestors came straight from Africa. Oh, it's not like the police, when they pull you over, they check, oh, you're Jamaican, oh no, you're good to go. Oh, when you're applying for a job application, oh, you're Jamaican, you're not just a regular Black American, oh, then you're good to go. No, we face the same discrimination. So it's weird that they want to make this unnecessarily divisive and cut out a segment of the Black community in this country from reparations. And I strongly disagree with that. And now to new media and how they've talked about this conversation. Now, I admit I don't talk about this maybe as much as I definitely don't talk about it as much as I should. I feel like I should. And the same goes for new media, because it is an important issue. This giant racial wealth gap is an important issue, and we see the ramifications of it anytime there's a crisis in this country, whether it's COVID or the economic crash or the financial crash of 2008, or if it was the Hurricane Katrina and the way that the Black community was devastated in New Orleans. So anytime there's a crisis, the issue of the racial wealth gap in this country rears its ugly head. So I do think it is something that should be mentioned more in new media, without a doubt. As for the specific host in new media, Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report, he is, from what I can tell, he supports reparations. He's in favor of reparations. Now, he is not as nuanced as I would like him to be, but he supports the idea in general. Aisha, you mentioned Tim Black. Again, I've seen him talk about it. I looked through his videos. Apparently 3 months ago, he did a video criticizing Joe Biden for pretending to be in support of reparations. So Tim Black does support reparations too. Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk, he's on the fence about the issue. He says in theory he supports the issue, but like you said, he thinks it's divisive, however you want to say it. So he's not fully on board with it. But I myself believe that depending on the way you go about it, it can be divisive, like I mentioned earlier on in this video. But if you go about it in a specific way, and if we get Medicare for all, and we get UBI, if we get a living wage or free college or any combination of those policies, and the all working class people in this country are better off economically, then they will be more open to giving trillions of dollars to Black people in reparation. So I wish he would just come out and make that argument for it instead of just being on the fence and saying, I don't support it, full stop. Or I support it in theory, but practically I don't support it. Just make the correct argument for the reparations. That's my view on it. And really, mostly, I think the lack of discussions on this topic, it comes down to the fact that Black people just there aren't as many prominent black voices in new media. And the few that are, they may just not have the language or the drive to talk about it over other issues that they talk about on their show, specifically policy issues that they talk about on their show. Because there's something people have to understand about being a content creator. It's not just, oh, I'm going to talk about something because it's important, and that's the only qualification for the time that I give to any issue. There are a lot of important issues, but content creators are artists. So what drives the content that they create is their passion. And for me, like I said, I support reparations, but it's not a main feature of my show because I have this drive in me that I just cannot explain that makes me focus on other important policies. And that's not to say reparations aren't important. I just, in my head, am drawn to some of those other policy issues. And I feel like if there were more Black voices in new media, then inevitably you would have someone whose main focus is the issue of reparations. You'd have more than one person whose drive is the issue of reparations, and that could be one of the main focuses of their channel. So I feel like if there were more like I said, if there were more Black voices in new media, then this conversation would be more front and center, and it would be more prominent, and you would be able to find more people talking about it more often. But the way that it is with a bunch of, really, let's just be real, a bunch of white people in new media, none of them have ever personally experienced the ramifications of this, the economic ramifications of white supremacy. They don't know what that's like. Their family doesn't know what that's like. The people around them most likely don't know what that's like. So they just fundamentally will not have the drive to make it a main feature of this show. It's not going to happen. So that's why I think having more Black voices in new media would make that a better chance of that being a bigger discussion in new media. But thank you for the topic suggestion. And Aisha, as you could probably tell, and other people in my audience, it took me so long to talk about this because there's so much nuance in this discussion. And you guys know me, if I'm gonna talk about something, I want to talk about it right. I don't want to just do some sloppy, recycled garbage that everybody else is talking about. So that's what really is behind like me taking so long to talk about this issue or any issue that I find important. It's not that I don't think it's important. I just have to put the ideas together in a way that I think does justice to the issue. And hopefully I did it here. I'd love if you would continue to be supportive to the show on Patreon. And anybody else who has a topic suggestion, that become a patron and message me and we can have a conversation about it.